I'm Harper, and I'm 28. 2 months ago, my mom died, and my dad hasn't said a word about my inheritance. Not one word. Standing in my beach house kitchen, staring at the ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows that I specifically chose for this exact view, I should feel grateful for everything I've built with my own hands. This house, with its weathered cedar shingles and wraparound deck that catches every sunrise. My marketing consultancy that grew from a laptop in my college dorm to a client list that includes 3 Fortune 500 companies. The life I crafted without a penny from my parents, proving to myself more than anyone that I could make it on my own terms. But instead, I feel this gnawing emptiness where answers should be. Like a tooth that's been pulled, but the phantom pain remains, reminding you constantly that something essential is missing. Mom's jewelry box sits on her vanity upstairs in their house, the mahogany one with the velvet-lined compartments that she'd let me explore as a child. Dad kept their house exactly the same after the funeral, down to her reading glasses on the nightstand, still folded at the page she'd never finish reading. Her coffee cup remains in the sink, lipstick stain and all, like he's afraid that washing it would erase her entirely. But those diamond earrings she promised me when I turned 16, the ones that caught the light every Sunday at church, the tennis bracelet that belonged to Grandma Eleanor, with its intricate Art Deco pattern that told stories of a more elegant era, all gone. Vanished like they never existed. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt forgotten by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Every time I call Dad, he sounds fine, too fine. Like a man reading from a script titled, How to Sound Like You're Grieving Appropriately. Just traveling, sweetheart, trying to process everything. His voice carries none of the broken edges I'd expect from someone who just lost his life partner. Instead, there's something almost buoyant underneath his words, a lightness that makes my skin crawl. He sold his sporting goods store to his manager, Greg, something he'd talked about for years but never had the courage to do while Mom was alive. She was always the practical one, the voice of reason that kept him from making impulsive decisions. I need space to grieve, he'd explained, but grief doesn't usually come with a spring in your step and expensive cologne that smells nothing like the Old Spice he'd worn for 30 years. I get it, though. 43 years of marriage doesn't just disappear overnight. The house they shared must feel like a mausoleum, every corner holding a memory, every silence echoing with conversations they'll never have again. I tried to understand why he needed to escape, to run from the life they'd built together. Mom inherited that lake house from Grandma Eleanor, along with substantial investments that Dad never seemed to care about before. He'd roll his eyes whenever Mom mentioned portfolio balances or property taxes, claiming that financial planning was women's work. The jewelry collection alone was worth more than my entire college tuition, pieces that had been in our family for generations, each one carrying stories of the strong women who wore them before. But asking about money 2 months after losing her felt wrong, heartless even, like I was some vulture circling, waiting for my piece of the carnage. So I stayed quiet, convincing myself that Dad would handle things when he was ready, that grief moves at its own pace, follows its own timeline. I convinced myself Dad needed time, that he'd handle Mom's will when the fog of loss finally lifted, that the man who taught me to fish in the lake's quiet coves, who showed me how to build sandcastles that could withstand the strongest waves, who used to call me his little warrior princess, that man would remember his only daughter when the grief fog lifted. The irony tastes bitter now, looking back. Sharp and metallic, like blood in your mouth after you've bitten your tongue. I was protecting his feelings while he was busy spending my inheritance on someone else. Someone who definitely didn't have my best interests at heart. My phone buzzes against the granite countertop, the sound sharp in the morning quiet. A text from Dad. Coming to see you tomorrow. Bringing a friend. A friend. After 2 months of radio silence about anything that mattered, of conversations that danced around every important topic like we were performing some elaborate waltz of avoidance, he's bringing a friend to my sanctuary. The beach house I bought at 25 with money I'd saved from 3 side hustles and a promotion I'd worked 80-hour weeks to earn. This place was my proof, to him, to Mom, to myself, that I didn't need their money to build something beautiful. The house sits on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, close enough to hear the waves but high enough to avoid the tourist crowds that flood the beaches every summer. I chose this location specifically for its privacy, for the way the morning light streams through my bedroom windows and paints everything golden. It's my refuge, my creative space, my reminder that I'm capable of more than anyone ever expected. I set the phone down and walk onto my deck, salt air filling my lungs with that briny sweetness that always centers me. The ocean stretches endless and gray-green under an overcast sky, waves rolling in with the kind of steady rhythm that usually soothes my anxiety. But today, something feels different, ominous. Tomorrow, I'll learn exactly what kind of friend comforts a grieving widower. Something tells me I'm not going to like the answer. Something tells me this friend has been doing more than just offering a shoulder to cry on. The waves crash against the shore below, and I can't shake the feeling that everything's about to change. That the careful distance I've maintained, the respectful silence I've offered, the benefit of the doubt I've extended, all of it is about to be revealed as naive at best, stupid at worst. Mom always said trust your gut. When something feels wrong, Harper, it usually is. Don't let politeness override your instincts. Right now, mine's screaming that Dad's surprise visit isn't about quality father-daughter time. It's about something else entirely. Something that's going to require every ounce of strength I inherited from the women who came before me. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of rain and something else. Change, maybe. Or maybe that's just my paranoia talking. Either way, I should probably prepare myself for the worst while hoping for the best. It's a skill I learned early in life, and one I have a feeling I'm about to need again. I'm watching from my front window when Dad's BMW pulls into my driveway at exactly 11 a.m., gravel crunching under tires that look freshly washed and waxed. He steps out first, moving with the kind of energy I haven't seen from him in years. Color in his cheeks that suggests recent sun exposure. Spring in his step that belongs to a man half his age. Even from a distance, I can see he's lost weight. Not the gaunt, grief-stricken weight loss I'd expect from a recent widower, but the deliberate kind that comes from wanting to impress someone new. Then she emerges from the passenger seat and my stomach drops like I've just stepped off a cliff. 29 years old, maybe 30 if we're being generous. Blonde hair that definitely doesn't come from nature. Styled in loose waves that probably require 3 different types of styling tools and enough product to stock a small salon. The kind of blonde that costs more than most people's monthly rent, and needs touching up every 4 weeks to maintain that particular shade of innocent that men of Dad's generation find irresistible. Her designer clothes scream new money louder than a car alarm in a quiet neighborhood. The handbag alone probably costs more than my first car. And her shoes, red-soled stilettos that have no business being worn for a casual beach house visit, click against my driveway with the confidence of someone who's never had to worry about practical footwear. And around her neck, catching the morning sunlight like a spotlight designed to blind me. Mom's diamond necklace, the one with the vintage clasp that belonged to my great-grandmother Margaret, who wore it to White House dinners back when presidents actually invited normal citizens to formal events. The necklace has 17 diamonds, each one hand-selected and set in platinum that's developed the kind of patina that only comes from decades of being loved and worn by strong women. My breath catches in my throat, a physical sensation like someone's wrapped their hands around my windpipe and squeezed. But I force my face into a welcoming smile, the kind I've perfected during years of client meetings where I had to pretend their terrible ideas were brilliant. Because apparently I'm about to meet Dad's midlife crisis in person, and she's wearing my dead mother's jewelry like she has every right to it. Harper! Dad bounds up my front steps like a teenager who's just discovered girls for the first time. His smile is wider than I've seen it since before Mom got sick, and there's something almost manic about his enthusiasm. This is Crystal. Crystal, meet my daughter. Crystal extends a perfectly manicured hand, nails painted the exact shade of red that matches her shoes, a coordinated effort that speaks to someone who has both the time and money to plan these things. My mother's diamonds dance at her throat as she moves, catching the light and throwing rainbow prisms across my front porch. So nice to finally meet you, she purrs, her voice carrying the kind of breathy quality that suggests she's practiced this introduction. Your father talks about you constantly, does he? Because in 2 months of phone calls that felt more like interrogations where I was the one asking all the questions, he's managed to avoid mentioning my inheritance, Mom's will, or apparently his new girlfriend who's wearing my dead mother's jewelry like some kind of trophy. The handshake lasts exactly 3 seconds, long enough to be polite, short enough to suggest she's not actually interested in getting to know me. Her skin is soft in the way that comes from regular spa treatments and a life free from manual labor. No calluses, no rough spots, just the smooth perfection of someone who's never had to work with her hands. Dad, you look great. I hug him, inhaling expensive cologne that definitely wasn't in his rotation 3 months ago. It's something woody and sophisticated, the kind of scent that comes in a black box from a department store counter where the salespeople wear all black and speak in hushed, reverent tones about fragrance journeys. Nothing like the Old Spice he'd worn since I was little, the scent that meant safety and Saturday morning pancakes and bedtime stories read in his scratchy baritone. How are you holding up? I ask. though the answer is written all over his face. He's holding up just fine, thank you very much. Better than I expected. His eyes drift to Crystal with the kind of dopey affection I haven't seen since he used to look at Mom across the dinner table during their early years, when they still held hands and shared inside jokes that made me roll my teenage eyes. Crystal's been helping me see that life doesn't end when life changes. Life changes. Is that what we're calling Mom's death now? Some vague euphemism that makes it sound like she decided to move to Florida instead of dying from the cancer that ate through her body for 8 months while Dad held her hand and promised her everything would be okay. Crystal slips her arm through Dad's with the practiced ease of someone who's done this move 1,000 times, and I catch another flash of familiar sparkle. This time, it's Mom's vintage Rolex, the one she wore every single day for 30 years. The gold has that particular warmth that only comes from being worn constantly, and there's a tiny scratch on the crystal that happened when Mom was gardening and caught it on a rose thorn. She never got it fixed because she said scars tell stories, and this watch had plenty of stories to tell. We thought we'd stay a few days, Dad continues, his voice carrying the kind of casual assumption that suggests they've already discussed this and decided I'd be thrilled to host them. If that's okay, Crystal's never seen the ocean. Never seen the ocean. Right. Because nothing says grief counseling like introducing your new girlfriend to scenic coastal views 2 months after your wife's funeral. And nothing says appropriate mourning period like taking said girlfriend on what amounts to a romantic weekend getaway at your daughter's expense. I take a moment to study Crystal more closely, noting the way she stands with her weight shifted to display her best angle, how her smile never quite reaches her eyes, the way she seems to catalog every detail of my house with the calculating gaze of someone appraising potential assets. This isn't a woman who's stumbled into a relationship with a grieving widower. This is a woman who's found a target. Of course. My voice sounds normal, which is impressive considering my brain is screaming warnings like a smoke detector with a dying battery. How long have you two been friends? The pause before friends is deliberate, and I watch both of them register the implication. Crystal's smile tightens almost imperceptibly, the first crack in her perfect facade. Crystal and Dad exchange a look, the kind of silent communication that happens between people who've already discussed how to handle this exact question. About 6 weeks, she says, her voice carrying just a hint of defensiveness. Richard's been showing me around the area. We've done some traveling together. 6 weeks. Mom died 8 weeks ago, which means that while the rest of us were still figuring out how to function in a world without her, while I was still finding myself reaching for the phone to call her before remembering she wouldn't answer, Dad was already moving on. Already finding consolation in the arms of a woman young enough to be his daughter. I gesture toward my living room, mind racing through the implications of what I'm hearing. Please, come in. I'll make coffee. I want to hear all about your travels. And boy, do I ever. Because something tells me those travel stories are going to be very illuminating about where exactly my inheritance has been vacationing. Something tells me that Crystal's friendship with my father has been expensive, extensive, and exactly as predatory as it looks from the outside. The way she looks around my living room, cataloging the value of my furniture and art, the way she touches Dad's arm with practiced intimacy, the way she's wearing my mother's jewelry like it was always meant to be hers, it all adds up to a picture that makes my skin crawl. But I smile and play the gracious hostess because sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to let them think they're the ones doing the hunting. We settle into my living room, and I watch Crystal's performance with the kind of fascination usually reserved for nature documentaries about predatory animals. She immediately gravitates toward the corner chair that gets the best natural light, angling herself so the morning sun highlights the blonde in her hair and creates a soft halo effect around her face. Every movement is calculated, deliberate. She poses more than sits, like someone accustomed to being photographed, or at least to being watched by men who are easily impressed by surface beauty. Dad watches her every move with the intensity of a man half his age discovering attraction for the first time. It's painful to witness, this complete transformation of the steady, practical man who raised me into someone I barely recognize. His pupils are slightly dilated, his posture more erect, his hands fidgety in the way that suggests he's nervous about impressing her. It's like watching a teenage boy trying to get the popular girl's attention, except the teenage boy is my 64-year-old father, and the popular girl is wearing my dead mother's jewelry. So tell me about these trips, I say, setting down a tray of coffee and pastries on the coffee table. The sound of ceramic against wood seems unnaturally loud in the charged atmosphere of the room. Where have you been exploring? I've arranged everything perfectly. My grandmother's china, real cream instead of the usual half and half, pastries from the bakery in town that charges $15 for a croissant. If Crystal wants to play the role of someone accustomed to luxury, I'll see just how far that performance extends. Crystal's eyes light up like a child on Christmas morning discovering a pile of presents under the tree. Oh my goodness, Richard's been so generous. She touches Dad's arm, her fingers lingering just long enough to be intimate, just briefly enough to seem natural. We started with that wine tour in Napa. Her voice takes on the breathless quality of someone reliving a particularly wonderful dream. 3 days at the Auberge du Soleil. Have you been there? The views are absolutely spectacular. We had the estate tasting with the sommelier, and Richard insisted on buying a case of their reserve Cabernet. $2,000 a bottle, can you imagine? Dad actually blushes, the kind of deep red that starts at his collar and creeps up his neck. Crystal planned everything. She has such an eye for luxury. I'll bet she does. The same way a shark has an eye for blood in the water. Mom always said Dad complained about airport delays when we took our simple family vacations. Long weekends at the lake house, camping trips where he'd grumble about the lack of cell service, beach rentals where he'd spend the entire time worrying about the cost of everything. Now he's willingly enduring planes, trains, and cruise ships for a woman who coincidentally appeared right after Mom died with a talent for spending money that isn't hers. Then the spa resort in Scottsdale. Crystal continues, her voice taking on that dreamy quality again. 4 days at the Four Seasons, complete with couples massages and private yoga sessions. And last week, the cruise to Alaska. She clasps her hands together like she's praying to the gods of expensive vacations. 7 days in a penthouse suite with butler service. Richard treated me like a princess. The way she says treated me like a princess makes my skin crawl. There's something possessive about it. Proprietary. Like she's marking territory. Like she's already decided that being treated like royalty is her due. And Dad is just the latest in a long line of men who'll be honored to provide that service. That sounds expensive, I say carefully, taking a sip of my coffee to give myself time to process the numbers that are adding up in my head. Alaska cruises aren't cheap, especially not penthouse suites with butler service. I'm doing quick math in my head and nearly choking on the figures. $15,000 minimum for a week-long Alaska cruise in a penthouse suite. Add in the Napa trip in Scottsdale, and we're talking about more money than most people spend on a car. Money's meant to be spent. Dad waves his hand dismissively. And for a moment, he sounds exactly like the man I remember from childhood. Confident, slightly reckless, the kind of person who bought lottery tickets and genuinely believed he might win. Your mother would want me to be happy. Would she? Because the mom I knew would want her daughter to inherit the family jewelry, not see it draped around some stranger's neck 6 weeks after the funeral. The mom I knew would be appalled at the idea of her husband spending their life savings on a woman who's clearly using him for his money. Crystal leans forward conspiratorially like she's about to share a delicious secret. The cruise was my idea. I thought Richard needed something special after everything he's been through. Something to remind him that life can still be beautiful, you know? She gestures dramatically, Mom's tennis bracelet sliding down her wrist and catching the light. The penthouse suite had the most amazing balcony. Panoramic views, 24-hour room service, a private hot tub. We watched the sunset over glaciers while drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. Penthouse suite. On an Alaska cruise. I do quick math in my head and nearly choke on my coffee. That's easily $15,000. For 1 week. While I've been eating ramen noodles and meal planning to save money for my emergency fund, Dad's been dropping 15 grand on floating hotel rooms. How thoughtful, I manage, though the word tastes like ashes in my mouth. Crystal beams like she's just received the Nobel Prize for thoughtfulness. I've always believed in living life to the fullest. Richard was practically a hermit before I met him, sitting in that house surrounded by all those memories. Now look at him. She's right, and that's what makes this whole situation so infuriating. Dad does look younger, more vibrant. There's color in his cheeks that wasn't there at Mom's funeral, energy in his movements that I haven't seen in years. He's also wearing a new gold watch I've never seen before, something sleek and expensive that probably costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. His shoes are Italian leather, soft and supple in the way that only comes from craftsmanship that charges by the hour. But underneath the obvious improvements, there's something hollow about his transformation. Like he's playing a role instead of actually living his life. The man I'm looking at bears only a passing resemblance to the father who raised me, and I can't decide if that's tragic or infuriating. Where did you two meet? I ask. Though I'm pretty sure I already know the answer involves somewhere expensive and exclusive. Another exchange glance passes between them, the kind that suggests they've rehearsed this part of the story. The country club, Dad says quickly, his voice carrying just a hint of defensiveness. Crystal was there with A friend. A friend. Crystal's smile tightens almost imperceptibly, and for the first time since she walked into my house, her perfect composure slips slightly. Someone I was briefly seeing. But then I met Richard, and everything changed. The way she says everything changed suggests that meeting Richard represented more than just a romantic awakening. It represented an opportunity, a chance to upgrade from whatever friend she was seeing before to someone with deeper pockets and fewer defenses. I nod, filing away every detail like evidence in a case I'm building against her in my head. Crystal was dating someone else at the country club. Someone else with money, presumably, since country club memberships don't come cheap. But then Dad showed up, fresh grief making him vulnerable, loneliness making him desperate for connection, and suddenly she discovered true love? How convenient. That's so romantic, I lie, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. It must be nice to have someone to share new experiences with. Richard's taught me so much about life, Crystal says, though something in her tone suggests she's done plenty of teaching herself. About expensive restaurants where appetizers cost more than most people's entire meals, luxury hotels where thread counts are discussed like stock portfolios, and apparently, the fine art of separating a grieving widower from his common sense and his dead wife's jewelry collection. Dad's phone buzzes against the coffee table, and he glances at it with the kind of mild annoyance usually reserved for telemarketers and door-to-door salesmen. The bank again, always wanting to discuss investments and planning. He silences the phone with more force than necessary, and I catch a glimpse of the caller ID, First National Trust. The kind of bank that doesn't call unless something important is happening. The kind of bank that manages estates and inheritance planning and probably has some very pointed questions about recent withdrawals. Money talk can wait, Dad continues, his voice carrying a forced lightness that doesn't quite hide the underlying tension. Today's about family. Family. The word hangs in the air like smoke, visible but intangible, meaningful but somehow poisoned by the context. We're talking about family while Crystal sits here wearing my mother's necklace, discussing cruise ship penthouse suites funded by money that should rightfully be mine. I smile and refill their coffee cups, noting how Crystal's hands shake almost imperceptibly when she reaches for her cup, how Dad's jaw tightens when he looks at his silenced phone, how the air in my living room has become thick with unspoken tensions and barely concealed lies. I'm already planning my next move, already thinking 3 steps ahead like Mom taught me when we used to play chess on rainy Sunday afternoons. The key to winning, Harper, is to let your opponent think they're in control while you set up the pieces for checkmate. Well, Crystal might think she's in control now, but she has no idea what she's walked into. She has no idea that the grieving daughter she's dismissing is actually a woman who inherited her mother's strategic mind, along with her sense of justice. And justice, I'm starting to realize, is exactly what this situation requires. By 6 p.m., we've exhausted safe conversation topics, and I feel like I've been performing in a play where no one bothered to give me the script. Crystal has managed to work in references to 3 more expensive restaurants. The truffle risotto at Le Bernardin was life-changing. 2 luxury hotels. The service at the Beverly Hills Hotel is simply unmatched. And a private wine tasting that apparently cost more than most people's mortgage payments. The sommelier said Richard has an exceptional palate for rare vintages. Each anecdote is delivered with the breathless enthusiasm of someone recounting a religious experience, and Dad laps up every word like a man dying of thirst who's just discovered an oasis. It would be almost touching if it weren't so obviously calculated, so transparently designed to reinforce the narrative that Crystal is a woman of refined tastes who deserves to be treated like royalty. Dinner has been a masterclass in subtle manipulation disguised as charming conversation. Crystal compliments my cooking while simultaneously mentioning that she's gotten used to having a personal chef during their travels. She admires my decor while casually noting that the hotel suites they've stayed in lately have raised her standards for interior design. Every comment is wrapped in enough sweetness to seem polite, but carries just enough poison to establish a hierarchy where she sits firmly at the top. I should show you to the guest room, I tell them, standing up from dinner and beginning to clear plates with movements that have become robotic, automatic. It's down the hall. Nice view of the... Actually, Crystal interrupts, setting down her wine glass with the kind of deliberate precision that suggests she's been planning this moment all evening. I'd prefer your suite, the master bedroom. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I have to grip the back of my chair to keep from stumbling. Every muscle in my body tenses, and I feel that familiar surge of adrenaline that comes with being unexpectedly confronted by something so audacious that your brain needs a moment to process whether it actually happened. I blink, certain I must have misheard. I'm sorry, what? The guest room looks small from what I could see when you gave us the tour. She examines her freshly manicured nails with the kind of casual indifference that suggests she's discussing the weather instead of demanding that I give up my own bedroom. Each nail is painted the perfect shade of red, filed to identical points, clearly the work of someone who spends serious money on regular professional maintenance. I'm used to more space. Plus, master suites have better lighting for my skincare routine. She glances up at me with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, the kind of expression that says she knows exactly how outrageous her request is, and she's testing to see if I have the backbone to refuse. Dad shifts uncomfortably in his chair, but says nothing. Just stares at his plate like it contains the secrets of the universe, his jaw working silently as if he's chewing words he's too cowardly to speak. The man who used to tell me that standing up to bullies was the only way to stop them from bullying others, who taught me that respect is earned and not demanded, who raised me to believe that my home was my sanctuary. That man is apparently too besotted to defend his daughter's right to sleep in her own bedroom. "Crystal, that's my bedroom." My voice stays level, though inside I'm screaming loud enough to wake the dead. The audacity of this woman knows no bounds. She's been in my house for exactly 8 hours, and she's already demanding that I rearrange my living situation to accommodate her beauty routine. The guest room has a queen bed and ocean views. It's really quite... I don't think you understand. Crystal's voice turns sharp, dropping all pretense of sweetness and revealing something cold and calculating underneath. The mask is slipping, and I'm getting my first real glimpse of the woman beneath the performance. I have specific needs. I require a certain level of comfort to function properly. The guest room won't work for me. The entitlement in her voice is breathtaking. She's speaking to me like I'm hotel staff who's failed to meet her expectations, like my house is her personal resort and I'm just the help who needs to be managed into compliance. Dad finally looks up, but not at me, at her, like he's waiting for permission to breathe, for instructions on how to feel about his daughter being treated like a servant in her own home. "Harper," he says quietly, and there's something broken in his voice, something that suggests he knows what he's about to say is wrong, but he's going to say it anyway. "Maybe you could take the guest room tonight? Just to make things easier?" Just to make things easier. For the woman wearing my dead mother's jewelry who's been spending my inheritance on luxury vacations for 6 weeks. For the gold digger who's turned my father into a stranger who can't even look his own daughter in the eye when he's betraying her. Before I can respond, before I can find the words to express the absolute fury that's building in my chest like a nuclear reactor approaching meltdown, Dad continues with the kind of casual authority that suggests he's thought about this, planned it even. "Actually, there's something else." He straightens in his chair, suddenly looking more serious, more present than he has all day. "Crystal is your new mother figure now." The words hang in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning everything they touch. My coffee cup stops halfway to my mouth, and I feel my face go slack with shock. Did he really just say what I think he said? Did my father just tell me that the woman wearing my dead mother's jewelry is my new mother? Crystal smirks behind her wine glass, clearly enjoying my shock. There's something almost predatory in her expression, like she's a cat that's just cornered a mouse and is savoring the moment before the kill. This was planned. This entire conversation, this whole evening, has been leading up to this moment where she establishes dominance and I either submit or declare war. "I'm sorry?" My voice sounds strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. "She wants coffee every morning," Dad continues, oblivious to the way I'm staring at him like he's just grown a second head. "Special coffee, French press, specific beans, the works. It's your responsibility as my daughter to take care of her needs." The words hit me like individual physical blows. Responsibility. As his daughter. To take care of her needs, like I'm some kind of unpaid domestic staff whose job it is to cater to his girlfriend's every whim. Like the house I bought with my own money has suddenly become her personal resort where I'm expected to provide room service. Dad stares at me with the expectation of compliance, as if he's asked me to pass the salt instead of surrendering my bedroom to his gold-digging girlfriend and becoming her personal barista. There's something almost robotic about his expression, like he's been programmed to deliver these lines without really thinking about what they mean. "My responsibility," I repeat slowly, tasting each word like it's a foreign language I'm trying to learn. "That's what family does," Dad says, and there's a note of self-righteousness in his voice that makes my blood boil. "We take care of each other. Take care of each other." Like how he took care of me by not mentioning my inheritance for 2 months. Like how he took care of Mom's memory by putting her jewelry on his new girlfriend's neck before her body was even cold. Like how he's taking care of me now by demanding that I become a servant in my own home. The hypocrisy is so staggering that for a moment I can't speak. All I can do is stand here, collecting dinner plates with hands that shake with barely controlled rage, trying to process the fact that my father has just asked me to surrender my bedroom and my dignity to a woman who's clearly using him for his money. I stand up slowly, collecting dinner plates with movements that feel mechanical, robotic. If I move too quickly, if I let myself feel the full force of what's just happened, I'm going to say something that can't be taken back. I'm going to explode with all the fury I've been keeping carefully contained since Mom died, since Dad started acting like a stranger, since Crystal walked into my house wearing my mother's jewelry like she owned it. Of course, Dad. The words taste like poison, but I force them out with a smile that probably looks more like a grimace. I'll take the guest room. Crystal practically purrs with satisfaction like a cat that's just been offered a bowl of cream. Thank you, Harper. I knew you'd understand. She leans back in her chair with the kind of languid satisfaction that comes from winning a battle you never thought you might lose. Oh, and I take my coffee very specific. French press, blonde roast, oat milk, 2 sugars. No artificial sweeteners. They give me migraines. The specificity of her coffee order is almost insulting in its complexity. Not just coffee, but a particular type of coffee prepared in a particular way with particular ingredients. Like she's testing to see exactly how far she can push me before I break. Got it. I smile sweetly, the kind of smile that probably looks more threatening than friendly. Anything else? Not tonight, she says graciously, like she's doing me a favor by limiting her demands to just my bedroom and my morning routine. But tomorrow, maybe you could show me around town. I'd love to see the local shops. Local shops. Where she can spend more of Dad's money while I play tour guide to my mother's replacement. Where she can continue the expensive lifestyle she's become accustomed to over the past 6 weeks, funded by inheritance money that rightfully belongs to me. I'd be happy to. I lie smoothly, though the words stick in my throat like peanut butter. It'll be fun. As they disappear upstairs to my bedroom, Crystal's heels clicking against my hardwood floors like a countdown timer, I start planning. Because if Crystal wants special coffee tomorrow morning, she's definitely going to get it. Just not the kind she's expecting. And definitely not served with the kind of hospitality she thinks she's entitled to. I have exactly 8 hours to figure out how to take back control of this situation. 8 hours to plan my counterattack against a woman who clearly thinks she's already won. 8 hours to prove that she's picked the wrong family to manipulate. Crystal thinks she knows what she's dealing with. She thinks I'm some pushover daughter who'll roll over and play dead while she dismantles my family and spends my inheritance. She's about to learn just how wrong she is. 4 a.m. comes early, but I've been awake since 2, lying in my own guest room like a refugee in my own house. The sheets smell wrong. Too much fabric softener, not enough of the lavender spray I usually use. The pillows are the wrong height, the mattress too soft, and every time I close my eyes, I see Crystal's smug face as she settled into my bedroom like she belonged there. I've been staring at the ceiling, listening to the waves, and making lists. Mental lists of everything that doesn't add up about Crystal and Dad's whirlwind romance. The timeline that puts their meeting at suspiciously soon after Mom's funeral. The expensive tastes that coincidentally align with Dad's newfound spending habits. The way she touches him like she owns him, looks around my house like she's appraising it for future sale. But mostly, I've been thinking about Mom. About the way she used to plan everything 3 moves ahead, like she was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Information is power, Harper. She'd tell me when I was struggling with mean girls in high school. Find out what people don't want you to know, and you'll understand exactly who they really are. I slip into my kitchen and fire up my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard as the screen casts blue light across my face. The house is silent except for the constant rhythm of waves against the shore and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Somewhere upstairs, Crystal is sleeping in my bed, probably wearing one of those expensive silk nightgowns that costs more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Our family has always maintained a joint account for emergencies. Dad insisted on it years ago, back when Mom was first getting sick, and he was worried about what would happen if something happened to one of them. Just in case, he'd said. So bills can still get paid if I'm not around to handle things. Mom thought it was smart planning. I thought it was paranoia. Now I think it might be the key to everything. The login screen appears, and I type in credentials I haven't used in over a year. The username is still Dad's initials plus Mom's birthday. Romantic in its way, though Crystal probably doesn't know the significance of those numbers. I hold my breath until the account loads, expecting to see the familiar balance that's been steady for years. Instead, I see numbers that make me blink twice, then check the account number to make sure I'm looking at the right place. $60,000 less than it should be. $60,000 that have vanished in the space of 8 weeks, spent on God knows what while I've been respectfully staying out of Dad's financial business. I scroll through recent transactions, my stomach dropping with each entry, my hands starting to shake as the pattern becomes clear. Napa Valley Wine Resort, $8,500 Azure Day Spa. Scottsdale, $3,200 Alaska Cruise Line. $15,700 Cartier Beverly Hills. $4,100 Nordstrom, women's clothing. $2,800 Salon Sebastian Beverly Hills. $1,200 Le Bernardin, New York. $800 Four Seasons Hotel. $6,200, and those are just the big ones. Dozens of smaller charges paint a picture of someone systematically draining dad's savings with the efficiency of a professional. Expensive dinners where appetizers cost more than most people's entrees. Luxury hotels where the thread count is discussed like investment portfolios. Designer clothes, jewelry stores, beauty treatments that cost more than most people's rent. But it's the dates that really make my blood run cold. The first charge is dated 12 days after Mom's funeral. 12 days. While I was crying myself to sleep in the same kitchen, still finding myself reaching for the phone to call Mom before remembering she wasn't going to answer, Crystal was apparently selecting her first dad-funded spa package. While I was avoiding calling him to give him space to grieve, to process his loss without the added pressure of dealing with inheritance logistics, she was picking out jewelry at Cartier with money that wasn't his to spend. The math is brutal in its simplicity. $10,000 a week, every week for 6 weeks. While I've been eating ramen noodles and clipping coupons and telling myself that financial responsibility means not touching my emergency fund, even for things I really want, Dad has been funding a lifestyle that most people only dream about. I screenshot everything, my hands shaking slightly as I save each transaction to a file I title Evidence, because that's what this is. Evidence of systematic financial abuse, of a predator who found a vulnerable target and methodically stripped him of his assets while he was too grief-stricken and lonely to think clearly. Then I do something I should have done weeks ago, something Mom would have done the moment she suspected something was wrong. I call Marcus Webb, my law school friend who specialized in estate planning and has a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. He answers on the third ring despite the early hour, his voice rough with sleep, but immediately alert when he hears mine. "Harper? What's wrong?" There's genuine concern in his voice, the kind that comes from knowing someone long enough to recognize when they're in real trouble. Marcus and I went through law school together before I decided that marketing was a better fit for my particular combination of creativity and strategic thinking. He's one of the few people who knows that beneath my generally calm exterior lives, someone perfectly capable of going to war when necessary. I need a favor. A big one. I take a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. Can you come to my house this morning at 8 and bring whatever paperwork we need to contest a will? Slow down. What will? Who died? My mother, 2 months ago. Dad's been handling everything, but I think... I pause, looking at the bank statements spread across my laptop screen, the evidence of financial devastation that Crystal has wreaked in just 6 weeks. Marcus, I think he's hiding my inheritance, and I think his gold-digging girlfriend is spending it. Silence on the other end, then the sound of Marcus sitting up in bed, suddenly fully awake. I can practically hear his legal mind shifting into gear, processing implications and calculating strategies. Send me everything you have. Bank statements, death certificate if you can find it. Any documentation about your mother's assets. Email it to me now so I can review it before I come over. His voice has shifted into professional mode, crisp and focused. And Harper? Yeah? If you're right about this, your father's in serious legal trouble. Executors who mishandle inheritances can face criminal charges. This isn't just about money. This is about criminal mismanagement of an estate. The weight of his words settles over me like a heavy blanket. Criminal charges. My father, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework and walked me down the aisle at my college graduation, could go to jail for this. But then I think about Crystal upstairs in my bed, wearing my mother's jewelry, planning to spend tomorrow spending more money that isn't hers to spend. After hanging up, I sit in my dark kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere above, Crystal is sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about her next expensive vacation or the jewelry she'll buy with tomorrow's shopping trip. She has no idea that her 6-week spending spree is about to come to a very abrupt end. I start measuring coffee beans for a very special breakfast. French press, blonde roast, oat milk, 2 sugars. Exactly like she requested, prepared with all the attention to detail she demanded. Plus 1 additional ingredient she definitely didn't order, didn't expect, and certainly doesn't deserve: the truth. By the time the sun rises over the ocean, casting golden light through my kitchen windows, I'll have everything I need to take back what's mine. And Crystal will discover that the grieving daughter she dismissed as a pushover is actually a woman who inherited more than just her mother's jewelry. I inherited her sense of justice, her strategic mind, and her absolute refusal to let anyone take advantage of the people she loves, even when the person being taken advantage of is too stupid to realize it himself. 5:30 a.m. finds me in full preparation mode, moving through my kitchen with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for military operations or high-stakes business presentations. I set the dining room table for 5 people, placing Crystal and Dad's usual spots at one end where they'll be sitting directly across from the extra chairs, positioned for maximum psychological impact. Every detail matters. The positioning, the lighting, the symbolism of power dynamics played out through furniture arrangement. Mom taught me that environments tell stories before anyone even speaks, that the way you set a stage determines how the drama unfolds. Fresh flowers from my garden create a centerpiece that screams special occasion, white roses for new beginnings, baby's breath for innocence, and just a touch of eucalyptus for protection. Crystal's favorite coffee sits ready in the French press, prepared exactly to her demanding specifications. I even found my grandmother's cloth napkins and my best china, the set Mom gave me when I bought my first house. Because if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with the kind of style and grace that separates civilized people from animals. The morning light streams through my dining room windows at exactly the right angle, illuminating the table setting like a stage prepared for the final act of a particularly dramatic play. Everything is perfect. Everything is planned. Everything is designed to send a message that this breakfast is not going to be the casual family meal Crystal thinks she's entitled to. At 6:45, I'm dressed in my best business casual outfit. The navy blazer that makes me look authoritative, the crisp white shirt that suggests competence, the kind of clothes I wear to meetings where I need to remind people that I'm not someone to be underestimated. My hair is pulled back in a style that's professional but not severe, makeup subtle but flawless. I want to look completely in control for what's about to happen, like someone who's 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. The sound of footsteps on the stairs makes my heart race, but not with anxiety, with anticipation. With the kind of electric excitement that comes from knowing you're about to watch a carefully constructed plan come together with clockwork precision. Dad appears first, looking confused at the elaborate table setting, his hair still mussy from sleep, wearing the kind of expensive pajamas that definitely weren't in his wardrobe 3 months ago. He moves slowly, like someone who's not quite awake yet, taking in the formal dining arrangement with the bewildered expression of a man who can't figure out why his daughter has suddenly turned into Martha Stewart. Crystal follows in a silk robe that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, the kind of garment that requires hand washing and has care instructions written in 3 languages. Mom's diamond earrings are already in place, catching the morning light and throwing rainbow prisms across my dining room walls. Even fresh from sleep, her makeup is perfect, her hair arranged in artful waves that suggest she either slept sitting upright or got up an hour early to prepare for her grand entrance. Well, Crystal surveys the scene with obvious pleasure, like a queen examining tribute that's been laid out for her approval. This is more like it. I was wondering when you'd start putting in proper effort. The satisfaction in her voice is unmistakable. She thinks this elaborate breakfast is proof that I've accepted my new role as her personal servant, that I've internalized the hierarchy she established last night, and am now demonstrating my submission through acts of domestic service. She settles into her chair like she's accepting a throne, arranging her robe with practiced elegance, positioning herself to catch the best light from the windows. Every movement is calculated to project an image of someone who deserves to be waited on, someone who's naturally superior and therefore entitled to the best of everything. Dad sits beside her, still looking puzzled but not questioning the setup. He's learned not to question Crystal's preferences, not to challenge her requirements, not to think too hard about the increasingly elaborate lifestyle she's introduced him to. It's easier to just go along, to let her make the decisions, to enjoy the attention of a beautiful woman without examining too closely what that attention is costing him. "This is beautiful, Harper," he says, and there's genuine appreciation in his voice, the kind of gratitude that makes my chest tight with conflicted emotions. What's the occasion? What's the occasion? If he only knew. If he had any idea what I've discovered, what I've planned, what's about to happen in the next 20 minutes. Just wanted to make Crystal feel welcome. I pour her coffee with a steady hand, noting how she watches me serve her like it's her due, like she's evaluating my performance as personal staff. After all, she's family now, right? The words taste bitter in my mouth, but I deliver them with a smile that probably looks genuine enough to fool someone who's not paying close attention. Crystal certainly seems pleased by the acknowledgement of her new status, by my apparent acceptance of her role in our family dynamics. Crystal takes a sip of her coffee and practically moans with satisfaction, like she's experiencing some kind of religious awakening through perfectly prepared caffeine. Perfect. Finally, someone who understands attention to detail. The backhanded compliment is delivered with the kind of condescension that suggests she's been suffering through inadequate coffee service for years and has finally found someone capable of meeting her standards. Like my ability to follow her specific brewing instructions is some kind of remarkable achievement rather than basic hospitality. Dad reaches for his usual mug, glancing again at the empty chairs positioned across from them. The question in his eyes is obvious, but he's learned not to ask too many questions about arrangements that Crystal might have approved. Better to go along than risk disrupting the peace she's brought to his life. Are we expecting company? Before I can answer, the doorbell rings. Right on time. Marcus has always been punctual, one of his many qualities that made him such an effective attorney and such a reliable friend. The sound cuts through the morning quiet like a blade, sharp and insistent and impossible to ignore. Actually, yes. I smooth my skirt and walk toward the front door with movements that feel dreamlike, surreal. This is it. The moment everything changes. The moment Crystal discovers that her 6-week vacation from consequences is officially over. I invited a couple friends to join us for breakfast. I hope you don't mind. Through the frosted glass, I can see Marcus's familiar silhouette, tall and lean and carrying himself with the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of courtroom experience. Next to him stands Jennifer Chen, the probate attorney he recommended, a woman whose reputation for thoroughness and aggressive advocacy makes her exactly the kind of legal representation this situation requires. Both carry briefcases and wear expressions of professional determination. They're here to do a job, to right a wrong, to ensure that justice prevails over manipulation and greed. They're my cavalry, arriving at exactly the moment when I need them most. I turn back to the dining room where Crystal and Dad sit frozen, coffee cups halfway to their lips, beginning to register that this morning is not going to unfold the way they expected. Don't worry, I call over my shoulder as I reach for the door handle, my voice carrying just enough sweetness to mask the steel underneath. They're very eager to meet you both, especially you, Crystal. They have so many questions about your relationship with Dad. The doorbell rings again, more insistently this time, like whoever's outside knows that time is of the essence and delay will only make things worse. Questions about what? Dad's voice cracks slightly, and I can hear the first note of real concern creeping into his tone. The confusion is giving way to something that might actually be awareness. The dawning realization that this elaborate breakfast might not be the celebration of family harmony he thought it was. I smile brightly and pull open the front door, letting the cool morning air rush into my house along with the two people who are about to change everything. Questions about Mom's will, of course. You know, the one that leaves everything to her only daughter. Marcus and Jennifer step inside, bringing with them the scent of professional competence and the kind of focused energy that comes from lawyers who've prepared thoroughly for what they know will be a challenging morning. Crystal's sharp intake of breath from the dining room is audible even from the front door, a sound that suggests she's finally beginning to understand that her carefully constructed world is about to come crashing down around her ears. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus says pleasantly, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that immediately shifts the power dynamic in the room. "Sorry to interrupt breakfast, but we have some urgent legal matters to discuss." The look on Crystal's face as she realizes what's happening, as she understands that her morning of being served coffee by her new stepdaughter has just turned into something much more serious, is almost worth everything she's put me through. Marcus sets his briefcase on my dining room table with the kind of authority that makes people sit up straighter and pay attention, the leather hitting mahogany with a sound like a judge's gavel calling court to order. Jennifer Chen follows suit, her expression maintaining the perfectly calibrated neutrality that comes from years of delivering news that people don't want to hear. She surveys Dad and Crystal with the clinical assessment of a surgeon examining a patient before making the first cut. The morning light streaming through my dining room windows suddenly feels harsh, revealing every imperfection, every line of tension, every crack in the carefully constructed facade that Crystal has been maintaining since she walked into my house yesterday. The romantic breakfast setting I'd arranged now looks more like a crime scene, complete with evidence and witnesses. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus begins, pulling out a thick folder with the deliberate precision of someone who's done this many times before. "We need to discuss your late wife's will." His voice carries the kind of professional weight that transforms a casual breakfast conversation into something official, something that demands attention and honest answers. The legal documents he spreads across my grandmother's lace tablecloth look stark and intimidating against the delicate fabric, like instruments of justice interrupting a tea party. Dad's face goes pale, the color draining from his cheeks so quickly that for a moment I'm concerned he might actually faint. His hands start to tremble slightly, the coffee cup rattling against its saucer as he sets it down with unsteady movements. We already handled that," he stammers, his voice lacking the conviction that might make his words believable. Everything was straightforward. Even as he says it, his eyes dart toward Crystal with the kind of desperate look that suggests he's hoping she'll somehow save him from this conversation, somehow make the lawyers and their threatening documents disappear through sheer force of will. Was it? Jennifer opens her own briefcase, retrieving official-looking documents that bear the seal of the probate court and have the weight of legal authority behind every word. Because according to the probate court records, no will was ever filed for Eleanor Thompson. The silence that follows her statement could cut glass. Crystal shifts in her seat, suddenly very interested in examining her coffee cup. No longer the confident queen holding court, but someone desperately trying to become invisible. The diamonds around her neck catch the morning light, and I watch Jennifer's eyes fix on them with the kind of laser precision that suggests she knows exactly what she's looking at. "Those are beautiful earrings," Jennifer says conversationally, though there's nothing casual about the way she's cataloging every piece of jewelry Crystal is wearing. "Family heirlooms? They were my wife's," Dad answers quickly, his voice carrying a note of defensiveness that suggests he knows this conversation is heading somewhere he doesn't want to go. "I gave them to Crystal as a gift." The word gift hangs in the air like a lie that everyone can see, but no one wants to acknowledge directly. Crystal's hand moves unconsciously to her throat, fingers brushing against my mother's necklace with the kind of possessive gesture that suggests she's already planning how to hold on to it. Interesting. Marcus spreads papers across the table with the methodical efficiency of someone laying out evidence for a jury. Because these belonged to Eleanor's grandmother originally. According to the will she filed with her attorney 3 years ago, all jewelry was specifically bequeathed to Harper. The papers he's displaying include photographs of the jewelry, detailed descriptions of each piece, and documentation that traces their provenance back 3 generations. It's the kind of thorough legal preparation that leaves no room for argument, no space for creative interpretation. The silence that follows could cut glass. It's the kind of quiet that happens when everyone in the room suddenly realizes that the game has fundamentally changed, that what seemed like a simple family breakfast has become something much more serious and potentially devastating. Dad's hands start shaking visibly now, his coffee cup rattling against its saucer like chattering teeth. She wrote a will? His voice carries the kind of desperate confusion that comes from someone who's been caught in a lie, but isn't quite sure how much the other people in the room actually know. There's something almost childlike about his expression, like he's hoping that if he seems confused enough, the adults in the room will explain everything and make the scary legal documents go away. "She did. And you witnessed it, Richard. Your signature is right here." Jennifer points to a line at the bottom of the document, where Dad's familiar signature appears in blue ink next to an official notary seal, which means you were fully aware of its contents. I watch Dad's face crumble as memory floods back, as the careful fiction he's been maintaining for 2 months suddenly collapses under the weight of documented evidence. He did know. He witnessed Mom write that will, probably thinking he'd never have to honor it because he'd die first, because men of his generation always assumed they'd go before their wives. The expression on his face is heartbreaking in its way. Confusion giving way to recognition, recognition giving way to shame, shame giving way to something that looks almost like relief that the lies can finally stop. But underneath it all is fear, the dawning understanding that his actions have consequences he never considered. "What exactly did my mother leave me?" I ask, though I already suspect the answer will be bigger than I imagined, more comprehensive than Dad let himself remember when he was busy funding Crystal's lifestyle. Marcus clears his throat with the kind of dramatic pause that suggests he knows the information he's about to deliver will fundamentally change the dynamic in the room. The lake house and all its contents. The jewelry collection, which includes pieces dating back 4 generations. Her investment portfolio, which totals approximately $200,000. He pauses, letting those numbers sink in before delivering what I suspect is the most devastating blow of all. And 50% ownership of Thompson's sporting goods. Crystal's coffee cup slips from her fingers, clattering against the saucer with a sound like breaking glass. Coffee splashes across my grandmother's tablecloth, dark stains spreading across white lace like blood seeping through bandages. 50%? Dad's voice barely registers above a whisper, the words coming out strangled and weak. But I sold. He can't finish the sentence. Can't admit out loud that he sold a business he only half owned, that the transaction he thought would fund his new lifestyle was actually illegal from the start. "Your mother was a silent partner in the business for 20 years, Jennifer explains, her voice carrying the kind of patient authority of someone delivering facts that can't be argued with or wished away. "She provided the initial capital when you opened the second location. Legally, half the store belongs to Harper now. I lean back in my chair, letting this information sink in, trying to process the scope of what my mother quietly arranged without ever telling me. She never mentioned the business partnership, never hinted at the investments, never suggested that she was systematically protecting me from exactly this kind of situation. Mom always was the practical one in the relationship, the one who planned for contingencies that Dad preferred not to think about. She knew him well enough to understand that grief might make him vulnerable to exactly this kind of predatory behavior. So she arranged things to ensure that her daughter would be protected even if her husband temporarily lost his mind. So the jewelry, the house, the investments, and half of Dad's business, I summarize, my voice steady despite the enormity of what I'm learning. That's correct, Marcus confirms, then slides another set of bank statements across the table. We also discovered several concerning transactions from the joint account. $60,000 in unauthorized spending since Eleanor's death. The bank statements land in front of Dad like an indictment. Line after line of expensive purchases that tell the story of Crystal's 6-week spending spree in brutal detail. Every luxury hotel, every expensive restaurant, every shopping trip funded by money that wasn't legally his to spend. Crystal stands abruptly, her chair scraping against my hardwood floors with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. I don't have to listen to this. Her voice carries the kind of desperate authority of someone who's realized that their carefully constructed world is collapsing and is trying to maintain control through sheer force of will. But there's something hollow about her defiance now, something that suggests she knows she's fighting a battle she can't win. Actually, you do. Jennifer's voice turns steel cold, dropping all pretense of politeness and revealing the kind of focused aggression that makes her one of the most effective probate attorneys in the state. Because if you knowingly spent inheritance money that didn't belong to Richard, you could face criminal charges for accessory to estate theft. The words criminal charges seem to hit Crystal like a physical blow. Her perfect posture falters, and for the first time since she walked into my house, she looks genuinely afraid rather than just annoyed that things aren't going her way. Dad finally finds his voice, though it comes out weak and defeated. Crystal didn't know. This is my fault. All of it. He's trying to protect her even now, even as the evidence of her systematic manipulation spreads across my dining room table like a roadmap of financial devastation. The loyalty would be touching if it weren't so obviously misplaced. The look Crystal gives him could freeze hell over. It's the expression of someone who's just realized that her ATM machine has been shut off, that the man she's been using for his money is actually broke, that her 6-week luxury vacation is officially over. Richard, fix this. Now. Her voice carries the kind of imperious demand that suggests she genuinely believes he can somehow make the lawyers and their evidence disappear, that he can wave a magic wand and restore her access to the lifestyle she's become accustomed to. I can't fix this, Dad snaps. And for a moment, he sounds like the man who raised me, the one who taught me that actions have consequences and that running away from problems only makes them worse. I knew about the will. I witnessed it. I thought I could handle things differently. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Handle things differently. That's a creative way to say, steal my daughter's inheritance to fund a gold digger's shopping sprees. But I suppose everyone needs their euphemisms to sleep at night. The morning light has shifted, casting longer shadows across my dining room table where the evidence of Dad's different handling spreads like a crime scene investigation. Each bank statement, each legal document, each photograph of stolen jewelry tells a story of systematic betrayal disguised as grief counseling. Marcus pulls out another document with the kind of theatrical precision that suggests years of courtroom experience. We've prepared papers to transfer all assets immediately. The jewelry needs to be returned today. The lake house deed transfers to Harper, and we'll need to restructure the business partnership. He slides the paperwork across the table toward Dad, who stares at it like it's written in ancient hieroglyphics or some other language he can't possibly be expected to understand. The documents represent the complete undoing of every financial decision he's made since Mom died, the legal equivalent of hitting a reset button on his entire life. How long do I have to? Dad's voice trails off as he realizes there's no good way to finish that sentence. How long do I have to enjoy my stolen money? How long do I have to pretend this relationship is about love instead of luxury spending? How long do I have to keep lying to myself and everyone else? Now, Jennifer interrupts, her voice carrying the kind of finality that doesn't leave room for negotiation or delay. We do this now, or we file criminal charges for estate theft. The words hang in the air like a sword suspended over Dad's head. Criminal charges, jail time, the complete destruction of whatever reputation he has left in a community where he's lived and worked for 30 years. The choice, such as it is, isn't really a choice at all. Crystal's face cycles through several colors before settling on an alarming shade of red that suggests her blood pressure has reached dangerous levels. You cannot be serious. Richard, tell them this is ridiculous. Her voice carries the kind of desperate authority of someone who's just watched their entire world collapse in the space of 30 minutes. All those expensive dinners, luxury hotels, designer clothes, spa treatments, all of it funded by money that was never legally available for spending. She's been living like a queen with a treasury that was actually empty. Sign the papers, Dad. My voice cuts through the tension like a knife through butter, calm and steady and completely unburdened by doubt. Just sign them. There's something liberating about finally saying exactly what I mean, about dropping the polite pretense that has governed our family interactions for my entire life. No more dancing around difficult topics, no more protecting Dad's feelings at the expense of my own interests, no more pretending that keeping the peace is more important than demanding justice. With hands that shake like autumn leaves in a strong wind, Dad reaches for Marcus's pen. Each signature looks like it cost him years of his life, like he's aging in real time as he signs away the financial fantasy he's been living for the past 2 months. But he signs. Every single page, every transfer document, every legal form that restores my inheritance, and strips away his ability to spend money that was never his. When he finishes, his hand cramping from the tension of gripping the pen too tightly, he looks at Crystal with something resembling shame. Something that might actually be recognition of how badly he's treated the people who actually love him. The jewelry, he says, his voice stronger now, more like the man who raised me. You need to give it back. Excuse me? Crystal's voice reaches a pitch that probably disturbs dogs in neighboring counties. It's not mine to give. It never was. Dad's voice grows stronger with each word, like he's remembering who he used to be before grief and loneliness made him vulnerable to predatory behavior. Please, return Harper's jewelry. The word please carries the weight of someone who's finally understanding the scope of what he's done, who's beginning to process the damage he's caused to his relationship with his only daughter. There's genuine remorse in his voice now, real recognition that his actions have consequences beyond his own temporary happiness. Crystal's laugh sounds like breaking glass, sharp and brittle and completely devoid of any real humor. After everything I've done for you? After I saved you from wallowing in grief? The audacity of her response is breathtaking. She's reframing her systematic financial exploitation as some kind of charitable intervention, like she was providing grief counseling instead of luxury vacation planning. Like her presence in Dad's life was about his emotional health, rather than her own material comfort. You saved yourself to a luxury vacation fund, I point out helpfully, unable to resist the opportunity to call her manipulation by its real name. There's a difference. Crystal storms upstairs with movements that suggest barely contained rage, her heels clicking against my hardwood floors like a countdown timer marking the end of her 6-week reign as Dad's expensive mistress. We sit in silence, listening to her footsteps overhead, the sound of drawers being opened and slammed shut, the general commotion of someone who's been forced to return stolen property and isn't happy about it. When she returns 15 minutes later, she's carrying a jewelry box I recognize from Mom's bedroom, the mahogany one with the velvet-lined compartments that held 4 generations of family treasures. Her face is a mask of barely controlled fury, but underneath the anger I can see something that looks almost like panic. The dawning realization that her comfortable lifestyle is about to come to a very abrupt end. She dumps the entire contents on my dining room table with dramatic flair, like a child having a tantrum who's decided that if she can't keep her toys, she'll at least make sure everyone knows how angry she is about giving them up. Necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and rings cascade across the mahogany surface with a sound like expensive wind chimes. Some pieces I haven't seen since I was a child. Treasures that Mom only wore on special occasions or kept stored away for safekeeping. There. Crystal's voice drips venom, each word carefully enunciated to maximize its poisonous impact. Take your precious family heirlooms. I start sorting through the jewelry with hands that tremble slightly, not from nervousness, but from the emotional weight of touching pieces that smell like Mom's perfume, that carry the warmth of her skin, that represent the love and care she put into protecting our family's legacy. Each item carries a memory. Birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, Christmas mornings when she'd let me try on her fancy jewelry and pretend to be a princess. The pearl earrings she wore to my college graduation, sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes as I walked across the stage. The anniversary bracelet Dad gave her on their 20th wedding anniversary, back when he still understood that jewelry was supposed to represent love rather than serve as payment for services rendered. Grandma Eleanor's engagement ring, with its Art Deco setting that speaks of an era when things were built to last. You don't understand what you've done, Crystal continues, her voice rising with each word as she builds toward what I suspect will be a dramatic exit. Richard, you just threw away the best thing that ever happened to you. The statement is so absurd, so completely divorced from reality that for a moment I'm struck speechless by the sheer audacity of it. The best thing that ever happened to him? A woman who spent $60,000 of his money in 6 weeks? A predator who saw his grief as an opportunity for personal enrichment? Dad looks up from the signed papers, and there's something new in his eyes. Something that looks suspiciously like clarity, like the fog of grief and loneliness and desperate need for validation is finally starting to lift. The best thing that ever happened to me was 43 years with Eleanor, he says quietly, and his voice carries the weight of genuine conviction for the first time since Crystal walked into our lives. And 28 years watching Harper grow into an incredible woman. For a moment, I see a glimpse of the father I remember, the man who taught me about integrity and self-respect and standing up for the people you love. It's not enough to undo the damage he's caused, but it's a start. Crystal's face contorts with rage, her careful mask of sophisticated femininity finally slipping to reveal something ugly and grasping underneath. You're pathetic. A lonely old man who can't face reality. She grabs her designer handbag with movements that suggest barely controlled violence, slinging it over her shoulder like a weapon she's preparing to use. Everything about her posture screams that she's about to make a dramatic exit, complete with parting shots designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. Enjoy your poverty, Richard, she says, turning back with one final, poisonous smile that reveals exactly what she really thinks about the man she's been pretending to care about. Because that's all you have left now. The front door slams with enough force to rattle the windows, the sound echoing through my house like a gunshot, marking the end of the most expensive 6 weeks of Dad's life. We sit in the aftermath, listening to the silence that follows her departure, processing the reality that the storm has finally passed and left us to assess the damage. Dad stares after her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions I can't quite read. Then he slowly turns to me, and there's something broken in his expression, something that suggests he's finally beginning to understand the scope of what he's lost and what he's done. I'm so sorry, Harper. I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking with something other than your brain, I reply dryly, unable to resist the opportunity to inject a little levity into what has been an overwhelmingly serious morning. It happens to men your age. Despite everything, the betrayal, the stolen money, the systematic dismantling of Mom's careful estate planning, Dad almost smiles. Your mother would have said the same thing. And just like that, for the first time in months, he sounds like my father again. We spend the next hour in relative silence, with Dad occasionally glancing toward the door like he expects Crystal to return with an apology and an explanation that somehow makes her behavior acceptable. She doesn't, of course, because women like Crystal don't apologize for getting caught. They just move on to the next target and refine their approach based on what they've learned. Marcus and Jennifer pack up their legal documents with the efficiency of people who've successfully completed a difficult job. The paperwork is signed, the transfers are in motion, and justice has been served with the kind of swift efficiency that only happens when someone is so obviously in the wrong that even they can't argue with the evidence. Around noon, Dad checks his phone for what must be the 15th time, then sets it down with a heavy sigh that suggests he's finally accepting that Crystal isn't coming back to apologize for her behavior or beg for another chance. She's not coming back, I observe, carefully placing Mom's jewelry back in its proper box, each piece finding its designated compartment like puzzle pieces returning to their correct positions. I know. Dad slumps in his chair, looking every one of his 64 years and then some. The energy that Crystal brought to his life, artificial though it was, has drained away, leaving him looking deflated and smaller than I remember. I thought she cared about me. There's something heartbreaking about the confusion in his voice, the genuine bewilderment of someone who can't understand how he misread the situation so completely. He really believed that Crystal's attention was about him as a person, rather than him as a source of funding for her expensive lifestyle. She cared about your wallet, I point out, though I try to keep my voice gentle rather than accusatory. He's been through enough this morning without me piling on additional shame. Harper, Dad, she spent $60,000 in 6 weeks. That's 10 grand a week. For comparison, that's more than most families spend on Christmas, birthdays, and vacations combined. For an entire year. I let those numbers sink in, watching his face as he processes the mathematical reality of Crystal's impact on his finances. It's one thing to know you've been spending money. It's another thing entirely to understand the scope of that spending in concrete terms. Dad rubs his temples like he's trying to massage away a headache that's been building for weeks. I was lonely. After your mom died, the house felt so empty. Every room held memories. Every silence felt like an accusation that I should be grieving harder, feeling worse, honoring her memory through suffering. His voice carries the kind of raw honesty that suggests he's finally ready to examine his own behavior without the comfortable lies he's been telling himself. When Crystal paid attention to me, when she made me feel young again, when she suggested adventures and experiences that had nothing to do with the life I'd built with your mother, it felt like freedom. I get it. And surprisingly, I do. Grief is complicated, and loneliness makes people do things they'd never consider under normal circumstances. But stealing my inheritance to fund her lifestyle wasn't grief. That was a choice. The word stealing hangs in the air between us, and I watched Dad flinch as if I'd slapped him. But sometimes the truth requires harsh language, requires calling things by their real names instead of hiding behind euphemisms and gentle explanations. I didn't think of it as stealing, Dad says quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought of it as postponing. I was going to tell you about the will eventually, handle the transfers when I was ready, when the grief wasn't so fresh. When? After she'd spent everything? Dad has no answer for that, which is answer enough. The truth is that he probably never intended to tell me about the inheritance at all. It was easier to let Crystal spend the money than to face the complicated legal and emotional process of actually honoring Mom's wishes. The lake house renovations take 3 months, but they're the kind of work that brings satisfaction rather than stress. Unlike the emotional renovation I've had to do on my relationship with Dad, working on Mom's sanctuary feels healing, purposeful. Each room restored is a tribute to her memory, each upgrade a way of honoring the legacy she left behind. I keep Mom's bedroom exactly the same, down to the reading glasses on the nightstand and the book she never finished. But everything else gets updated. New roof that won't leak during winter storms, new deck that can handle another 40 years of family gatherings, modern bathrooms that don't require a degree in engineering to operate, and a kitchen that would make Food Network jealous. The first weekend after completion, I invite Dad for dinner. He arrives alone, driving the modest Honda he bought after selling his BMW to help cover some of the money Crystal spent. The car suits him better than the luxury sedan ever did, practical and reliable instead of flashy and expensive. He walks through the renovated lake house with tears in his eyes, touching surfaces and examining details like he's seeing the place for the first time. In many ways, he probably is. This house was always Mom's domain, her vision, her sanctuary. He lived here but never really inhabited it the way she did. Your mother would love this, he says, standing in the new kitchen where granite countertops and professional-grade appliances create the kind of cooking space Mom always dreamed about. She always said this place had potential. She was right about a lot of things. We eat dinner on the new deck, watching the sun set over water that reflects the sky like liquid gold. Dad seems smaller in this space somehow, more subdued, but also more genuine than he's been in months. The artificial energy that Crystal brought to his life is gone. But so is the desperate need to prove that he's still young and vital and worthy of attention from beautiful women. Thank you, he says quietly as we clean up the dinner dishes together. For what? For stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. For fighting for what your mother wanted. For giving me another chance when I didn't deserve one. His voice carries the weight of genuine remorse, the kind of regret that comes from understanding not just that you've done something wrong, but why it was wrong and what it cost the people you care about. You're my dad, I tell him, and mean it despite everything that's happened. Temporary insanity aside, you're still my dad. The phrase temporary insanity makes him smile for the first time all day, a real smile that reaches his eyes and reminds me why I've always loved this man despite his flaws and poor judgment in women. I'm learning to be alone, he says. Really alone. For the first time in 43 years. It's harder than I thought it would be, but also cleaner. Honest. No one to perform for, no one to impress, no one whose needs I have to consider before my own. It's the most self-aware thing I've heard him say in months, maybe years. The recognition that his relationship with Crystal was about performance rather than connection, about filling a void rather than building something real. Good, I tell him. You need to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be what someone else wants you to be. We sit in comfortable silence as the stars come out over the lake, listening to the sound of water lapping against the shore, and the distant call of loons that Mom always said brought good luck. For the first time since she died, it feels like our family might actually survive the damage that grief and loneliness and poor judgment have caused. It's not the same as it was before. It will never be that again. But maybe with time and effort and a commitment to honest communication, it can be something good in its own right. Maybe that's enough for now. 2 weeks later, Dad calls me at 7 a.m., which is unusual because he's never been a morning person. Even during his brief period as Crystal's sugar daddy, he preferred to sleep in and let his expensive lifestyle begin at a civilized hour. The early call suggests either a crisis or a breakthrough, and I'm hoping for the latter. "I've made a decision," he announces without preamble, his voice carrying the kind of focused determination that I haven't heard from him in years. "I'm selling the house." I nearly drop my coffee mug, the ceramic slipping in my suddenly nerveless fingers. "The house? Dad, that's where you and Mom lived for 20 years, I know." His voice cuts through my protest with a firmness that suggests he's thought this through completely, considered all the implications and emotional costs. "But Harper, I can't walk through those rooms anymore without seeing her ghost. Every corner holds a memory, every piece of furniture tells a story about the life we built together." He pauses, and I can hear him taking a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Or worse, I see Crystal there. I see her wearing your mother's clothes, sitting in your mother's chair, sleeping in your mother's bed. I've contaminated my own home with memories I can't erase." The pain in his voice is genuine, raw in a way that suggests he's finally processing the full scope of what he's lost. Not just Mom, but also his ability to find comfort in the home they shared. Crystal's presence has poisoned the sanctuary that should have brought him solace during his grief. "Where will you go?" "I was hoping—" He pauses, and there's vulnerability in his voice that reminds me of childhood moments when he'd admit he didn't know how to braid my hair or help with my math homework. "Maybe somewhere near you?" "Not with you," he adds quickly, apparently still capable of reading my mind across phone lines. "I know you need your space, and I need to figure out how to be alone properly. But maybe nearby?" The vulnerability in his voice catches me off guard. This is Dad asking for help without actually asking, reaching out for connection while respecting my boundaries. It's the kind of emotional maturity that's been noticeably absent from his behavior over the past few months. "There are some nice properties about 10 minutes south of here," I tell him, already mentally scrolling through real estate listings I've seen. Smaller houses, but still oceanfront. More manageable for someone who wants to simplify their life instead of funding someone else's luxury addiction. "Want me to call a realtor?" "Would you?" The relief in his voice is palpable, like someone who's been carrying a heavy weight and has finally found a place to set it down. For the first time since Mom died, he sounds like he has a plan that makes sense, that's based on his actual needs, rather than his desire to impress someone who was never worth impressing. 3 months later, the transformation is remarkable. Dad moves into a charming cottage that's everything the McMansion he shared with Mom wasn't. Small enough to be manageable, simple enough to be comfortable, and far enough from his old life to represent a genuine fresh start. The cottage has weathered cedar shingles that have turned silver from years of salt air, window boxes that need replanting, and a screened porch that catches the morning sun perfectly. It's exactly the kind of place he and Mom talked about retiring to someday, back when they were young enough to believe they'd have decades to make those dreams come true. But it's the workshop behind the main house that really sells him on the property. A small building with good natural light and enough space for him to pursue the kind of hands-on work that always made him happiest. For the first time since I've known him, Dad starts talking about doing something he loves rather than something that pays well or impresses other people. "I could open a small fishing shop," he muses, walking through the workshop space with the kind of excitement I used to see when he talked about expanding the sporting goods store. "Nothing fancy. Just tackle, bait. Maybe some guide services for tourists who want to experience real local fishing instead of the commercial charter boats." "You want to work again?" "I want to do something I love," he corrects me, and there's the important distinction in his phrasing. The sporting goods store was about profit margins and inventory management and dealing with suppliers who cared more about sales quotas than helping people find the right equipment. This would be about helping people catch fish. The difference between those two approaches to work is the difference between a job and a calling, between going through the motions and finding genuine purpose. It's the kind of clarity that often comes from losing everything and having to rebuild from scratch. 2 months after moving in, Dad has his first customer at the new fishing shop. A woman named Sarah who needs advice about deep-sea fishing gear, someone who clearly knows enough about the sport to ask intelligent questions and appreciate knowledgeable answers. She's recently widowed herself, around Dad's age, with gray-streaked hair and laugh lines that speak of genuine joy rather than calculated charm. "She seems nice," I observe after she leaves with a new rod and reel, having spent 20 minutes discussing the merits of different fishing techniques with Dad, like they're old friends comparing notes about a shared passion. "She is nice," Dad agrees, but there's something careful in his voice, like he's deliberately trying not to sound too enthusiastic. "She's also not looking for someone to fund her lifestyle." "How can you tell?" She drives a Honda with 200,000 miles on it and pays in cash. Dad grins, and for the first time since Crystal, there's genuine warmth in his expression when he talks about a woman. Plus, she actually knows what she's talking about when it comes to fishing. She grew up on a commercial fishing boat, learned the trade from her grandfather before women were commonly accepted in that industry. Revolutionary concept, I say dryly. A woman with her own skills and interests instead of just expensive tastes and strategic beauty treatments? I'm learning, Dad admits. Slowly, but I'm learning. The difference between Sarah and Crystal is immediately obvious to anyone with functioning eyes and basic common sense. Sarah asks questions about fishing techniques, not restaurant recommendations. She wears clothes designed for actual outdoor activities, not photo shoot opportunities. She talks about her own experiences and interests instead of just admiring Dad's supposed sophistication and worldliness. Most importantly, she seems to see him as a person rather than a resource. When she looks at him, there's genuine interest in her eyes, instead of the calculating assessment that Crystal always wore like a mask. She laughs at his jokes because she finds them funny, not because laughing is part of her strategy for extracting maximum financial benefit from their interaction. It's exactly the kind of relationship Dad needs. One based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than financial dependency and emotional manipulation. For the first time since Mom died, he seems like himself again. Not trying to be younger or cooler or more sophisticated than he actually is, just being a man who knows about fishing and enjoys helping other people enjoy it too. Maybe there's hope for him yet. 6 months after the Crystal disaster, I'm standing in the lake house kitchen. Contractor estimates spread across the granite countertops like battle plans for a renovation war. Mom's sanctuary needs work, the kind of comprehensive updating that requires both vision and substantial financial investment. The roof leaks during winter storms, sending water cascading down the walls in patterns that speak of years of deferred maintenance. The deck is rotting in places where the support beams have finally surrendered to decades of weather and neglect. The master bathroom hasn't been updated since the 80s, complete with avocado green fixtures that were probably stylish when Dynasty was popular. But the bones are good. Solid in the way that only comes from houses built when craftsmen took pride in their work, and materials were chosen for durability rather than cost efficiency. The stone fireplace still dominates the living room with the kind of presence that can't be replicated in modern construction. The kitchen windows still frame perfect views of the lake, offering a panorama that changes with the seasons and never loses its ability to inspire peace. The wraparound porch still catches every sunset, providing the kind of natural entertainment that's better than anything television can offer. This is where Mom wanted me to build memories, where she imagined grandchildren learning to swim in the lake's protected coves, family Christmases that felt magical instead of obligatory, Sunday dinners that stretched into evening conversations about everything and nothing. She saw this place not just as a retreat from the world, but as the foundation for the kind of family legacy that survives generations. I run my fingers along the kitchen island where she used to roll out pie crust for Thanksgiving desserts, where she taught me to knead bread on Saturday mornings when I was small enough to need a step stool to reach the counter. The marble is cool under my touch, worn smooth by decades of use, marked with the subtle scratches and stains that tell stories of family meals and holiday preparations. Call back tomorrow, I tell the contractor, a weathered man whose estimates suggest both competence and reasonable pricing. I want to start renovations as soon as possible. The work becomes a kind of therapy, a way of honoring Mom's memory while creating something new from the foundation she left behind. Each room restored is a tribute to her vision, each upgrade a way of ensuring that this house will serve future generations the way she always intended. Dad's fishing shop is thriving in its quiet way, attracting the kind of customers who value expertise over flashy marketing, who appreciate someone who actually knows what they're talking about instead of just trying to sell them the most expensive option available. Sarah has become a regular presence there, and their fishing conversations have evolved into coffee dates, which have evolved into something that looks suspiciously like courtship, conducted at a pace appropriate for people who understand that real relationships require time to develop properly. She's nothing like Crystal, Dad assures me over dinner at his cottage, though his tone suggests he's still slightly amazed that such women exist in the world. She owns her own house, has her own retirement savings, drives her own car, and she actually listens when I talk instead of just waiting for her turn to redirect the conversation back to expensive things she wants to buy. That's a pretty low bar, Dad. But I'm smiling as I say it, genuinely happy to see him building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. She owns her own house, he continues, like he's still processing this revolutionary concept. Paid off the mortgage 10 years ago with money she saved from running her own business. has her own retirement savings that she managed herself instead of expecting someone else to fund her golden years. And she actually listens when I talk instead of just nodding while she calculates how much my next gift is going to cost. The contrast he's drawing is so stark it's almost comical, but there's genuine wonder in his voice as he describes a woman who doesn't see him as a resource to be exploited. After Crystal, the idea of a genuinely independent woman probably seems miraculous. But I like Sarah, and not just because she's the opposite of Crystal in every meaningful way. She has an easy laugh that doesn't sound calculated, doesn't wear a single piece of jewelry that belonged to someone else, and when she looks at Dad, she sees him instead of his bank balance. She asks about his day because she's actually interested in the answer, not because she's fishing for information about his financial status or upcoming purchases. The lake house renovations take 3 months of intensive work, but the results exceed even my ambitious expectations. I keep Mom's bedroom exactly the same, preserving it like a shrine to her memory, down to the reading glasses on the nightstand and the bookmark still holding her place in a novel she'll never finish. But everything else gets updated with the kind of thoughtful improvements that honor the house's history while making it functional for modern life. New roof with architectural shingles that will last for decades. New deck with composite materials that won't rot or require constant maintenance. Modern bathrooms with fixtures that work properly and don't require a degree in plumbing to operate. And a kitchen that would make Food Network jealous. Professional-grade appliances, granite countertops, and an island large enough to accommodate the kind of family gatherings Mom always envisioned. The first weekend after completion, I invite Dad and Sarah for dinner. Dad walks through the renovated space with tears in his eyes, touching surfaces and examining details like he's trying to memorize every improvement. For him, this house represents not just Mom's memory, but also the possibility of new traditions, new memories that honor the past while embracing the future. Your mother would love this, he says, standing in the new kitchen where everything gleams with the promise of meals yet to be cooked, gatherings yet to be hosted. She always said this place had potential that just needed the right vision and sufficient investment to unlock. She was right about a lot of things. The understatement of the year, really. Mom's wisdom becomes more apparent with each passing month, each decision that proves her foresight and careful planning. Sarah runs her hand along the new butcher block island with the appreciation of someone who understands good craftsmanship when she sees it. She had excellent taste. This feels like a real family home, not just a showplace designed to impress visitors. There's something profound about that distinction. This house isn't about displaying wealth or creating Instagram-worthy spaces. It's about functionality and comfort, about creating an environment where families can gather and connections can deepen over time. That night, we sit on the new deck, watching the sun set over water that reflects the sky like liquid gold. Dad and Sarah hold hands with the tentative sweetness of teenagers discovering romance for the first time, while I nurse a glass of wine and feel genuinely content for the first time in months. The peace that settles over me isn't just about the beautiful setting or the satisfaction of completed renovation work. It's about family, about the possibility of healing and moving forward without forgetting where we came from. Thank you, Dad says quietly, his voice barely audible above the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore. For what? For stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. For fighting for what your mother wanted when I was too stupid and selfish to honor her wishes myself. For giving me another chance when most daughters would have written me off as a lost cause. His voice carries the weight of genuine remorse. The kind of regret that comes from understanding not just that you've done something wrong, but why it was wrong and what it cost the people you care about. It's the foundation that real forgiveness can be built on. You're my dad, I tell him, and mean every word despite everything that's happened. Temporary insanity aside, you're still my dad. Sarah squeezes his hand with the kind of gentle support that suggests she understands the weight of this conversation, the importance of this moment in our family's healing process. You raised a smart daughter, Richard. I had a smart wife to help me, Dad says, and there's genuine gratitude in his voice when he speaks of Mom now, instead of the guilt and defensiveness that characterized his mentions of her during the Crystal period. As if on cue, a loon calls across the lake, its haunting voice echoing off the water with the kind of wild beauty that can't be manufactured or purchased. Mom always said loons were good luck, a sign that the natural world was in balance and all was as it should be. I think she approves, I say, raising my wine glass toward the sound in a toast to memory and possibility. Dad and Sarah raise their glasses too, and we toast the future under a sky full of stars that seem brighter here than anywhere else in the world. The future stretches ahead of us, uncertain, but no longer clouded by the toxic presence of people who see family as a resource to be exploited rather than a treasure to be protected. For the first time since Mom died, it feels like we're going to be okay. 1 year later, I'm hosting Thanksgiving at the lake house, and the dining room table stretches to accommodate a gathering that would have made Mom proud. Dad sits at one end, carving turkey with the confidence of a man who's found his footing again, who's learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Sarah coordinates side dishes with the efficiency of someone who actually enjoys feeding people, who finds satisfaction in nourishment rather than performance. The guest list includes cousin Emma and her kids, who fill the house with the kind of chaotic energy that comes from children who feel completely safe and welcome in their surroundings. Marcus and Jennifer are here too, having evolved from legal representatives to genuine friends through the shared experience of righting a significant wrong. They bring wine and stories from other cases, other families who've learned the hard way that grief makes people vulnerable to predators. This is exactly what Mom imagined, I tell Dad as we clean up later, working together in the kitchen like we used to when I was young enough to dry dishes while he washed. Family dinners that actually feel like family instead of performance art. Family dinners where everyone wants to be here, he agrees. And there's something profound about that simple statement. No one at this table is here out of obligation or manipulation or strategic positioning. We're here because we choose to be, because this feels like home and family and safety. Sarah appears with leftover containers, having somehow organized an entire meal's worth of food into neat portions, without anyone asking her to take charge of logistics. Richard, you take the green bean casserole. Harper, you're getting turkey sandwiches for a week. You don't have to. I start to protest. Honey, I've been feeding people my whole life, Sarah interrupts with the kind of warm authority that brooks no argument. It's what I do. And it is what she does. Sarah feeds people, literally and emotionally. She brings Dad soup when he has a cold, remembers Emma's kids' birthdays, asks about my business without trying to solve problems I haven't asked for help with. She's nothing like Crystal, and everything like what Dad actually needs. A partner instead of a dependent, a companion instead of a consumer. She's also nothing like Mom, which is equally important. She doesn't try to fill Mom's role or compete with her memory. She's creating her own place in our family structure, adding something new and valuable without trying to replace something irreplaceable. Later, after everyone leaves and the house settles back into its peaceful evening rhythm, Dad and I sit by the fireplace with cups of coffee. Real coffee. Made in a regular coffee maker without any of Crystal's pretentious French press demands or complicated preparation rituals. Do you ever think about her? I ask, though I'm not sure why I'm bringing up Crystal on what's been such a perfect day. Crystal? Sometimes. Dad's voice carries a note of amazement, like he can't quite believe he ever fell for her act. Usually when I'm paying bills and realizing how much money I have left now that she's not spending it on spa treatments and designer handbags, I laugh, because it really is that simple in the end. Without Crystal's expensive lifestyle to fund, Dad's finances have stabilized, his stress levels have dropped, and his bank account has begun the slow process of recovery. That's one way to measure a relationship, I observe. What about you? Any regrets about how everything played out? I consider this question seriously, watching flames dance in the fireplace Mom loved, surrounded by the house she envisioned as our family's gathering place for generations to come. Do I regret the confrontation, the legal intervention, the complete dismantling of Dad's relationship with Crystal? I regret that it took so long to fight for what was mine, I finally answer. I regret letting you get so deep into that mess before speaking up, before trusting my instincts about what was really happening. I'm the adult, Harper. That wasn't your responsibility. Maybe not, but I knew something was wrong. I felt it in my gut from the moment she walked up my front steps wearing Mom's jewelry, treating my house like her personal resort. I should have trusted that instinct sooner instead of trying to be polite and respectful while she systematically dismantled everything Mom worked to protect. Dad nods thoughtfully, acknowledging the truth of what I'm saying without trying to minimize his own responsibility for the disaster. Your mother always said trust your gut. She was usually right about people, about situations that seemed too good to be true. She was right about the will, too. She knew you might need protection from yourself, might be vulnerable to exactly this kind of predatory behavior. Smart woman. The simple acknowledgement carries the weight of genuine appreciation, recognition of Mom's foresight and protective instincts. The smartest. We sit in comfortable silence, listening to the lake lap against the shore with the kind of steady rhythm that has marked seasons and years and generations of family gatherings in this place. Tomorrow, Dad and Sarah will go fishing, pursuing the kind of simple pleasure that doesn't require expensive equipment or exotic locations. I'll work on design projects from the sunroom that's become my favorite office, helping couples plan celebrations that honor their relationships rather than their bank accounts. The lake house will continue being exactly what Mom intended, a place where family gathers, where memories are made, where love is celebrated instead of taken for granted. It's her legacy, but it's also our future, the foundation for whatever comes next in our family's story. My phone buzzes with a message from a potential new client, someone who wants help designing their dream wedding. The old me would have taken every job that came my way, regardless of the people involved or the values they represented. Now I'm more selective, more careful about who I choose to work with and what kinds of celebrations I want to help create. Life's too short to work with people who don't value what you bring to the table, who see service providers as servants rather than professionals. It's a lesson I learned the hard way, but one that's made my business stronger and my relationships healthier. I should head home, Dad says, standing and stretching in the fireplace's glow. Sarah's making breakfast tomorrow, and I don't want to be late. She's good for you. She is. He pauses at the door, looking back at the house that represents both our family's past and its future. And Harper, thank you. For everything. For fighting for your inheritance, for helping me see clearly, for giving me another chance when I probably didn't deserve one. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Dad. Even when you're being an idiot. He hugs me tightly, and I smell the familiar combination of lake air and coffee that always meant safety when I was little. That still means family and home and unconditional love despite temporary lapses in judgment. After he leaves, I lock up the house and stand on the deck one last time, breathing in the night air and feeling genuinely grateful for everything that's brought us to this moment. The lake stretches endlessly under starlight, peaceful and eternal, exactly as it was when Mom was alive, and exactly as it will be for future generations who gather here. This is where I'll bring my own family someday, when the right person comes along. Someone who values what I've built rather than seeing it as something to exploit or improve upon. Where I'll tell stories about Grandma Eleanor's wisdom, Grandpa Richard's temporary insanity, and how sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to let them destroy themselves. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales of family drama, inheritance battles, and what happens when you finally stand up for yourself. Because sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who need boundaries the most, and sometimes protecting family means fighting for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. The loons call across the water, their wild voices carrying across the darkness like a blessing, like confirmation that all is as it should be. Mom's still here, in this house she loved, in the family she protected, in the legacy she left behind for those wise enough to fight for it. Some things are worth fighting for. Some battles are worth winning. And some inheritances are worth more than money. They're worth the preservation of love, dignity, and the kind of family bonds that can survive even the worst mistakes. The stars reflect off the lake's surface like scattered diamonds, beautiful and eternal and utterly beyond price. Just like the love that brought us through this crisis and will carry us forward into whatever comes next. Some things, it turns out, really are priceless.